There are some memories that claw at your mind, refusing to fade. Some truths too heavy to carry, yet too terrifying to set down. I've tried for years to bury it, to silence the screams echoing in my head. But the past doesn't stay dead. It lingers, whispering in the dark, waiting for the moment you let your guard down. And tonight, I can't fight it anymore. It's been years since that night. Years since I last saw Lyanna, but I can still see her face, frozen in time. I can still hear his voice, feel the cold grip of fear tightening around my throat. Lyanna and I were inseparable, best friends since childhood. We did everything together, shared every secret. That day was supposed to be just another ordinary afternoon. 2 kids laughing, playing in the park, oblivious to the shadow lurking just beyond our innocence. We saw him, a man. Something about him felt wrong. His face twisted in a way that didn't seem natural, as if it had been molded by suffering. But we were just kids. We didn't understand the kind of evil that existed in the world. Not until it was too late. He took us, I still don't know how. One moment we were in the park, running through the grass. The next we were trapped in a suffocating darkness. The air was thick with the scent of rot and damp. The walls seemed to close in, swallowing every sound. We screamed, we begged, but he just watched, drinking in our terror like it was the sweetest nectar. Then he spoke. "Only one of you gets to leave." His words shattered me. I didn't understand. I couldn't. We were just children, but he did. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was waiting, watching, wanting to see the fear twist into something worse. Desperation. And I gave him what he wanted. I begged. I pleaded for my life, swearing I'd do anything, promising I'd keep silent forever if only he'd let me go. Then he smiled. That wicked, awful smile. "You stays," he said, pointing at Lyanna. "You can go." I don't remember running. I don't remember how I made it home, but I did. I burst through the door, screaming for my parents, gasping for air between sobs as I told them what had happened. They called the police, and soon sirens filled the air. Officers searched, combed through every inch of that park, every nearby building, but they never found her. Lyanna was gone, as if she had never existed at all. My parents held me tight, telling me over and over that it wasn't my fault, that I had done the right thing by coming home. But their words couldn't drown out the truth screaming inside me. I had left her, I had abandoned her, and then the nightmares started. Every night I saw her, standing in the dark, her eyes hollow and empty, her voice a whisper carried by the wind. "You left me," she said. Her voice never rose, never screamed, but it cut through me like a blade, and behind her, always looming, was the shadow, the man. He never spoke, he never moved, but I felt him, watching, waiting. Even when I woke up, I could still feel his presence, as if he had followed me back from that nightmare world. Years passed, but the dreams never stopped. No matter how much I tried to move on, how much I tried to convince myself it wasn't my fault, she never let me forget. She was always there, in my dreams, in the corner of my vision, just beyond my reach. And the shadow, it never left either. I don't know if it's real, or if my guilt has twisted itself into something I can't escape. But every night when I close my eyes, I know what's waiting for me. Her face, her voice, and that figure standing just behind her, grinning in the darkness. No matter how far I run, I know the truth: I will never be free. The weight of that night presses down on me, a burden I cannot shake, no matter how much time passes. The police might have given up searching, their files collecting dust in some forgotten cabinet. But she never did. She still lingers in the spaces between reality and nightmare, calling my name, whispering accusations, her voice curling around me like smoke. She waits in the quiet moments, just beyond my reach. Her presence a constant reminder of my betrayal, and the shadow behind her. He is there too, always waiting, his figure a dark smudge against the fabric of my thoughts. He is patient, unhurried, knowing that eventually I will have to face him again. Perhaps in sleep, perhaps in death, but one day I will return to him. Because deep down I know this is not over. It never was. Maybe next time I won't be the one who gets to leave. Maybe next time there won't be an escape. The police might have given up searching, but she never did. She still lingers in the spaces between reality and nightmare. A few weeks ago, something happened that I still can't wrap my head around. It was around 3 a.m. and I was deep in sleep when I suddenly woke up. At first I thought it was nothing, maybe my cat shifting around, making noise like he always does. But then I reached over and he was right there, curled up beside me, completely still. Except his eyes weren't on me. They were locked on the closet, wide and unblinking. His tail puffed up in a way I had never seen before. The air in the room felt thick, pressing against my skin like it had weight. There was an unsettling silence, the kind that makes the hairs on your arms stand up. It was as if the entire room was holding its breath, waiting. And then I heard it, a slow, raspy breathing. It wasn't mine, it wasn't my cat's. I told myself it was my imagination, a lingering effect of too many late-night horror movies. But the sound didn't stop. It was heavy, deliberate, like someone struggling to take in air. Every rational part of me screamed not to move, not to investigate, but I'm an idiot. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and, in a moment of absolute brilliance, whispered, "Hello." The closet door creaked. A movement so slight that I could have convinced myself it was nothing if I hadn't seen the shadow. It was human-shaped, standing just inside the darkness of the closet, barely visible against the dim light. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst from my chest, but when I yanked the door, it piled up in a way that I desperately tried to convince myself had played tricks on my eyes. But something about the shadows didn't feel right. They were too thick, too deep, like they were swallowing the light. My cat let out a low growl, something he never did, and that was it. I was done. The next morning I told my roommate, expecting shock, concern, maybe even an attempt to debunk it. Instead, they just shrugged and said, "Oh yeah, that happened to me last month." Excuse me? That's the kind of thing you tell someone before they move in. I spent the next night with every light on, a baseball bat by my bed, and my cat curled up at my feet like a tiny guardian. The closet stayed silent, but the feeling remained. It was like something was waiting, watching. A few nights later, just as I started to think maybe I had imagined it all, something worse happened. This time, it was 2 a.m. I was half asleep when I heard it again, the breathing, but it wasn't coming from the closet. It was coming from the middle of the room, right next to me. My body locked up as I forced myself to turn my head. My cat was no longer on the bed. He was by the door, fur bristling, staring into the darkness with an intensity that made my blood run cold. And then I saw them. 2 red eyes, flickering, barely there but unmistakably watching me from the far corner of the room. They weren't solid, they wavered like they were struggling to exist, like something not meant to be seen. The breathing grew louder, heavier, until I could feel it on my skin, cold, damp, pressing against me. Then, the eyes moved. They disappeared for a second and reappeared at the foot of my bed. My cat bolted out of the room, abandoning me with whatever this thing was. I scrambled for my phone, hands shaking, fumbling with the flashlight, but when I turned it on, the eyes were gone. Instead, something else caught my attention. A smear on the wall. Dark, wet, dripping. My breath came in short gasps as I stared at it, the silence stretching so thin it felt like the air might shatter. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The next morning, I confronted my roommate again, hoping for some kind of explanation, some reassurance that I wasn't losing my mind. Their response? "Yeah, I've seen the red eyes too. Don't worry, it always leaves after a few nights." Always leaves? What if this time it doesn't? What if this time it stays? What if this time it stays? That night I barely moved, heart pounding at every small sound. And then, just after midnight, it started again, the breathing. But this time, it was everywhere. The room grew icy, my breath visible in the dim glow of my bedside lamp. A new sound joined the breathing. Scratching, soft at first, then more insistent. It was coming from under the bed. I hesitated, every nerve screaming not to look, but I had to. I leaned over, shining my light down, and saw a hand. Thin, pale, with too many joints and jagged black claws. I recoiled, scrambling backward, and that's when the bed shifted, something slamming against the underside hard enough to make the mattress jump. And then, the eyes. They were no longer across the room, they were right behind me. A cold rush of air blew across my neck, and before I could react, my bedroom door flew open. My roommate stood there, bat in hand, eyes wide with the kind of fear that told me this wasn't my imagination. We slammed the door and ran, leaving the room behind. We haven't been back in there since, but I can still feel it. The air is charged, thick with something unseen, something waiting, watching. If anyone has dealt with something like this before, tell me, because I don't think it's leaving this time. And if it isn't leaving, what happens when it decides to come out?